It is my honor and pleasure to introduce Representative Al Green. Al Green has been a stalwart and a fighter for justice and equity in our community for many, many years, beginning with his work at the NAACP, and he's been in the House of Representatives since 2005. We could not ask for a better representative and fighter for public safety, holistic approaches to violence prevention, including addressing the social determinants of health. We couldn't ask for a better leader than Representative Al Green. Please join me in welcoming Representative Al Green to the stage.
Thank you very, very much for that very fine, warm, and kind introduction. I am so honored to be with you this morning. So let me start with this. I have been in Congress, as has been indicated, for some number of years. And I have seen many persons come to Congress with agendas. But rarely do you find a person who can come to Congress with an agenda and not have that agenda consumed by Congress. Ms. Macbeth, Congresswoman, whom you will hear from shortly, is a person who came with an agenda, implemented her agenda, and is still pushing forward on this issue of crime prevention. I just ask that you give her a hand for me, please, for the outstanding job she has done in maintaining her agenda. Not easy to do in Congress. I also am very proud to be here in the 9th Congressional District and to welcome all of you. And I'd like to, in so doing, present something to the persons who've made this event possible. It's a wonderful thing to talk about crime prevention, and it's another thing to do something about it. In fact, I think this idea of having a holistic approach is something that is long overdue because everybody has a role to play. So having said this, I have a certificate of special congressional recognition that I'd like to present to the Harris County Public Health Department, and I do so in honor of your service to the community, but I especially salute you for what you're doing today to give us the additional intelligence necessary to move forward with a very positive agenda that can help us in crime reduction. It is my honor to present the certificate to Bobby, Ms. Robinson. Ms. Robinson, though some may measure their lives by days and years, others by heartthrobs, passions, and tears, the surest measure under God's sun is what for others in your lifetime have you done. Thank you for what you've done for others in your lifetime.
Representative Ms. Beth, Congressman Green would like you to join us on stage.
In the photo, please?
Yes. We'll put her in the middle.
You in the middle.
Friends, I do believe that this holistic approach is absolutely necessary. And while we will focus today on the health aspects of it, health care to a certain extent, there are other aspects that are important too. So in a very terse and laconic moment, I would just like to mention one thing that I think is exceedingly important. With the belief that everyone has a role to play, everyone, I believe that we cannot do this without the aid and assistance of the organized business community. I believe that the Chambers of Commerce, the Houston Partnership, they have a role to play, and we have to ask that they get involved in this process as well. No one should be allowed to have a pass when it comes to eliminating gun violence that's taking the lives of our babies and our children, not only in the state of Texas, but across the length and breadth of this country. No one should have a pass. And no one includes the governor of this state. The governor of this state cannot have a pass. 19 babies and 2 teachers were killed at Robb Elementary School. And this governor refuses to have a special session of the legislature to deal with gun violence. This is a special problem, Governor. You ought to have a special session of the legislation to do something about the murder of 19 babies at a school. I demand and I call on the governor to do more than simply say we have a problem. If you believe, as I believe, that the governor ought to be involved, show it with your applause. I had to get that off my chest. Thank you. Now, having said this, it becomes my preeminent privilege to introduce our keynote speaker. She is one who serves as an administrator of the Office of Juvenile Justice and Delinquency Prevention, one who served as president and CEO of the Youth First Initiative, a national campaign focused on ending incarceration of youth by investing in community-based alternatives. She is one who co-founded and co-chaired Act for Juvenile Justice, a campaign to reauthorize the Juvenile Justice and Delinquency Prevention Act. Without further ado, I am pleased to present to you the Honorable Liz Ryan. Would you please give her a big Texas-sized expression of appreciation? Texas-sized, if you would, please. A little more Texas than that, please. That's what I'm talking about. Thank you.
Good morning. So as the Congressman said, and I want to thank him for his warm welcome and your warm welcome, and I want to thank the Harris County Public Health for inviting me to speak at their inaugural Violence Prevention Conference. As other presenters have emphasized in their sessions, preventing and responding to violence in our communities requires a holistic, multifaceted approach. This conference is a great opportunity for us to exchange ideas on how to improve public safety and examine what those solutions look like in practice. So during my presentation, I'll focus on how we can address youth violence by working together across local, state, and federal levels. These insights are informed by my work in the juvenile justice field as a youth advocate and now as the Office of Juvenile Justice and Delinquency Prevention Administrator. And I'll also highlight a few reasons why Ojjdp champions and why we all must strive for a developmentally appropriate, family-centered, and equitable response to justice-involved youth. So I want to begin by sharing some encouraging news. This past week, Ojjdp released data about youth arrests for violent crime, which includes murder, robbery, and aggravated assault. And that has declined since 1995, reaching a new low in 2020. So if someone could help me put the slide up here. I don't know how to, let's see. There we go, thank you. Okay, so as you can see from the slide here, the number is 78% below the 1994 peak and 50% less than the number of youth arrested in 2010 for the same crime categories. Okay, and the decrease in youth arrests isn't only limited to violent crime. Arrests for all offenses involving youth fell 84% between 1996 and 2020. Okay. So here's one more heartening statistic. The 424,000 total youth arrests in 2020 represent a 38% drop from the previous year and half the number from 5 years earlier. Now, we are aware of reports that some communities may be experiencing an uptick in certain crimes among young people, but this data, the latest available, confirm the field's efforts to transform the juvenile justice system into one that emphasizes safety, opportunity, and potential in making an impact. So if we continue to let the evidence inform our delinquency reduction strategies and we focus our resources on what works, success will follow. So before I go any further, I want to just give you a quick overview of what Ojjdp does. All right, there we go. Okay, so Ojjdp, we're part of the Department of Justice's Office of Justice program, and we provide national leadership and resources, including training, technical assistance, supporting research, and funding to states, counties, territories, tribes, and communities so that they can better protect children, prevent delinquency, and improve their juvenile justice system. So there are 3 priorities that guide our work. The first is treating children as children. We believe that young people should not be in adult courts, adult jails, and adult prisons. The second is that we know that young people thrive best in families. So we want to see more young people served at home in their communities with their families and appropriate supports. And finally, we believe that all young people should have the same chance at success, and we're working to open up opportunities for young people who've had contact with the juvenile justice system. We engage people with lived experience, and I know I've met a number of you here who have lived experience in the system, and we want to know from you what works, and we want to invest in that. We are centering directly impacted young people in our work. We've created a youth and family partnership working group to look at our business operations and how we do business, how we're working with young people and families. And we are committed to ending racial inequity within the juvenile justice system. So that is a core component of all the work that we do. Okay. So we share a common objective with all of you to advance what's best for our young people, our families, and our communities. And it's a worthwhile goal, one that we can achieve if we take a balanced, multidisciplinary, and nuanced approach to addressing delinquency. So let me break that down a little bit further. So to begin with, research and data must inform our community's efforts. I know we've seen shocking headlines around the country and here in Texas about the harms of incarcerating young people in the justice system. And the research tells us that incarceration during adolescence is associated with physical and mental health challenges in adulthood. We also know that confining young people actually dramatically increases the likelihood that they will reoffend. And time and again, the research basically tells us that locking up kids is not a good idea. Now, I will just say, yesterday I got to tour what was formerly your detention facility and is now an educational transition center, and they're working to provide services and supports to communities. So that was really inspiring to see that, and I want to really champion and lift up the folks at the Harris County Probation Department for their work on that, and with many others in this room. Now, despite the progress we've made as a nation getting rid of ineffective, tough-on-crime policies, too many jurisdictions are still relying on incarceration as a solution to delinquency. And to compound that, there have been incidents of violence around the country, and in light of that, some jurisdictions, I don't know if that's happening here in Harris County or not, but some jurisdictions are talking about rolling back some of the juvenile justice reforms. Now, as we look at this, and the data showing that youth violence has actually been declining for decades, we understand that there may be some increases in some places for some crimes, but that doesn't justify rolling back juvenile justice reforms. And those kinds of actions, I think, are misguided and frankly dangerous. The physical, psychological, and developmental cost to our young people is too great, so we have to continue to move forward in the right direction. Community-based alternatives to youth incarceration, I know a number of which you are engaging in here, have strong support from youth advocates and juvenile justice experts because they enhance youth outcomes, they increase public safety, and they strengthen neighborhoods. But we know states are still spending the vast majority of their juvenile justice dollars, around $5 billion a year, to incarcerate our young people. And we think that that switch needs to be made away from incarceration and towards more community. And if you look at incarceration across the country for young people, the numbers have been coming down, and so we have less and less people who are locked up in detention and incarceration, but we're still using that strategy, even though those numbers have gone down dramatically. We could be shifting those resources to much more effective community-based alternatives. And we know that closing these facilities and reinvesting this savings is going to be challenging, right? So we actually released an RFP earlier this year. This was for states, but the next time around we're going to include counties. We wanted to see and pilot examples of how you could close and repurpose youth correctional facility. And what's exciting is you're already doing that here in Harris County. So we hope to come back to see the place when you complete the work on that. So one of the key components of doing this kind of thing where we're closing and repurposing facilities and shifting the resources towards more community-based alternatives is really having a multidisciplinary partnership. And that is exactly what you are doing here today by having all of these different systems here together. So it's very exciting and very encouraging to see what you're doing here. So we know still that far too many young people come into contact with the juvenile justice system and that they themselves are victims of violence, neglect, or abuse. And it's our responsibility as child-serving professionals, youth advocates, and justice practitioners to provide these young people with the treatment, services, guidance, and support that they need to grow and thrive. We have to help them heal, and we want to encourage pro-social connections to family and community, and we want to keep them engaged in school and connected to opportunities. So we have to be proactive in our service provision. We should be able to anticipate young people's needs and the challenges and address those before they arise. But no one provider or practitioner alone has all the tools and resources to meet these evolving needs. Coordination across systems, like what you're doing today, is critical to improving outcomes for our young people who are involved with the justice system and their families. Listening sessions and working groups are great ways to assess the community's strengths. I've heard yesterday that you were doing a lot of that here already. And that helps you identify what strengths you have, what challenges remain, and what focus areas to address to achieve sustainable long-term reductions in youth violence. Local stakeholders, including community leaders, law enforcement personnel, school administrators, service providers, youth and families, all have to have a seat at the table. This ensures that decisions about the community's youth violence problem reflect the community's priorities. In addition, diverse stakeholders will contribute different perspectives, skills, and ways of doing things, all of which will enhance your community's community violence prevention efforts. Participation by youth and families is particularly critical to the group's effectiveness. And for far too long, those of us on the justice side of things have not listened to directly impacted youth and their families. And so we know that these kinds of solutions actually require conversations with people who can tell us firsthand what's going on. This summer, at the Office of Juvenile Justice, for the first time in a very long time, we held listening sessions. We did them virtually with young people, family members, and other stakeholders across the country. And we're incorporating that feedback into the work that we're doing. So I know we want to learn from those of you out here who are already doing those kinds of things. But we ourselves, if we're going to be talking about it, we need to be doing it ourselves. So I guess one of the bottom lines here is that youth violence is not inevitable. Collaboration, community involvement, and innovation go a long way to addressing the issue. So I want to leave with one final best practice to consider: ensuring a balanced response to a community's youth violence problem. The current approach to addressing youth violence too often leans heavily on enforcement, with prevention, intervention, and reentry often being treated as add-on strategies. So community violence is a complex, multifaceted problem that requires a comprehensive, multifaceted response. So communities have to adopt a holistic approach to public safety, one that doesn't quantify safety in terms of conviction rates and length of sentences. if you hope to reduce the occurrence and severity of violence perpetrated against and by young people. So stakeholders who want to make a real and sustainable difference should address the root causes of neighborhood crime before it stops and adopt a range of prevention, intervention, and reentry strategies to reduce youth violence. Programs need to emphasize youth engagement, treatment, and rehabilitation. They should also reduce the use of incarceration and address barriers to successful reentry for youth returning to their communities after confinement. Far too many of our young people have been exposed to violence, either as victims or as witnesses. Whether that exposure happens in the community or in confinement, the outcome is the same. These youth have an increased chance of failing in school and at work, suffering from mental health problems, or experiencing serious medical problems. They may become future victims of violence or become involved in the juvenile or criminal justice system. So we at Ojjdp envision a nation where all young people are free from crime and violence, and you are valuable partners in helping us to achieve that vision. So if we can prevent a young person's exposure to violence, provide services to help them heal when they are exposed, and keep them connected to school, family, and community, we have a much better chance at keeping young people on the path to healthy, productive lives. Our collective commitment to the safety and well-being of our youth will guide our success. And I want to leave you with just ways you can connect with us to follow the work we're doing, but also so we can stay in touch with you and hear about the work you're doing. And congratulations on your conference today. Thank you so much.
Please join me in giving Ms. Ryan a round of applause and sharing that important and impactful information. It is really important that the federal agencies design programs at the outset that allow local governments to implement effective and efficient strategies that really address the root causes. And so we're grateful that she was able to come and share with us today, looking at models and opportunities for us at the federal level to redesign and reimagine our programming to help support our youth. We're going to take a break and begin our efforts to get our lunch activities going, and as we wait on Congresswoman Sylvia Garcia to join us. So we're going to take a brief break, and we'll be back momentarily. Thanks.